We are Maria
and Nicole. We're two secular homeschooling moms that have
been there, done that.
History is a dynamic subject that provides a window into the past, helping us understand the present and shape the future. As homeschoolers, we have the flexibility to explore history in unique and engaging ways, one of which is through creating timelines.
Yeah, and when some people think of timelines, they think of a boring list of chronological events, but they can be so much more than that in your homeschool. You can use them as an interactive way to help in comprehension and memory. In today's episode, we're going to talk about creative methods to make history timelines a fun and enriching part of your homeschool.
And as usual, we want to stress that our podcast is an inclusive space for your everyday parents that are looking for education options. We are not here to convince you to homeschool. We want to stress that you need to do what works for your child and for your family.
Every family is different.
Absolutely. And you know your children best. So feel free to take what advice or information you get from here that works for you and chuck the rest.
Good morning, Nicole.
Good morning, Maria. How's it going?
It's going great. It's so nice to see you today.
You too. Now that we're like bi-weekly or every three, what's every 3 weeks?
Every 3 weeks, tri-weekly. I don't know. Well, you know what? We are so busy homeschooling our own children that, we don't always have time to record.
No. But then we don't get to see each other because we don't have like once the kids get older, we don't have like a weekly park day.
I know. That's why you and I have to keep walking those hills. We do our little hike in our neighborhood.
We do a hill walk.
A quad burn. Yeah,
it
for sure.
Is.
Well, the big prom is next weekend.
I know. What about the prom? Can your homeschooler go to the prom? Yes.
Our kids have been to many proms. We've made not only an episode about it, but we also made a YouTube video where we walked you through this incredible event.
Yeah.
And last year's theme was Broadway, and this year is fairy tales, right?
Yeah, we have a group here in the DFW area that puts on this prom that is over the top.
Over the top. People drive from out of state to come to this prom, and it's attended by how many kids this year?
I don't even know this year, but last year I think they had 1,200 per night. It's like a 2-night
Yeah,
prom.
they had to divide it into 2 nights because it's so well attended.
Yeah, it's at a big convention center.
It is an incredible, magical night. And but every family, as you know, has to devote 4 hours at least to their
to their volunteer job. But what are you doing this year?
I am doing setup the morning of, which I'm kind of bummed about because I really liked doing the check-in process last year, so I was able to walk around the finale. So I'm still going to try to sneak in and do that.
But you'll get a preview of what the tables look like. Our theme this year is Once Upon a Time, or is that what it is?
That is fairy tales. Is it Once Upon a Time? I think it's...
I mean, that is fairy tales.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I have to look.
It's going to be a great night. They never disappoint. Last year when they did Broadway, they did, they built an entire Central Park. They did a Serendipity Cafe. It's just gorgeous.
It was really neat. And it was perfect for our kids who are all theater people who had this Broadway theme going on.
Right.
It was really awesome.
And what's exciting is they always announce what next year's theme is at this prom.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. They recycle some of the themes just because they're so good, but I can't wait to see. I'm doing my usual job, so I do get to work prom night. I work in the seamstress room during check-in for anybody who does not pass dress code. We usually do, like 100 or so girls
or any wardrobe malfunctions.
Yes. In fact, like the first part of my night is fixing girls' dresses. The second part of my night is fixing all the boys' pants that split when they try and do certain dance moves.
Oh, didn't you say they put out a memo this year that the boys have to keep their shirts on?
Yes, and I was like, I wonder which boys they're talking
They
about.
may be talking about my son and his best friend Steele. I'm telling you, these two are characters, aren't they?
They are. And I did see Steele shirtless at the prom last year.
Oh, it was funny. He used his tie as a headband.
Oh my gosh, they're hilarious. They have a good time. The kids all have a good time. So.
Yeah. Well, let's get into today's episode.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to talk about. History is one of my favorite subjects to not only teach, but to learn about. I didn't learn much in public school. So when it came back around, when it was time for me to teach my own kids, I learned just as much as they did alongside them. I love that.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of homeschooling, right?
It sure is, yeah. So many homeschoolers, especially those who follow a classical or a literature based curriculum, use programs that are history centric. And a big part of driving those ideas home is by incorporating a history timeline. So, first, let's define what exactly is a history timeline, Nicole.
Well, I'm glad you asked. A history timeline is a chronological representation of historical events, arranged in sequential order based on their occurrence in time. And it basically serves as a visual tool for organizing and understanding that flow of history. And it allows our kids to see the progression of events, developments, and changes over time.
And history timelines typically include significant dates or events, and sometimes key figures or movements associated with each time period. And they can cover a wide range of topics from the Big Bang to ancient civilizations to modern times. And they also focus on specific regions or cultures or themes, and you can do so much with this.
Right. And timelines can be presented in various formats, paper-based charts, digital platforms, or physical displays. They may incorporate text, illustrations, photos, maps, or any other visual elements to provide context and enhance understanding.
Yeah, you can really get creative with this. And these have always been one of my favorite parts of our curriculum. We're going to talk about all of these different types of timelines later, including our book of centuries and our timeline figures. But let's get into defining this
Right. I mean, overall, history timelines are just valuable educational resources, and they help students visualize and comprehend the complexities of the past, and they really can help facilitate a deeper appreciation and analysis of historical events and their significance. They're a lot of fun.
They really are.
So, just a reminder that this is a weekly episode. We drop one every Thursday morning just for you. And if you have any additional ideas or comments, please come and comment on our Facebook page, on the episode thread, or send us an email at info@btdthomeschool.com. We'd really love to hear from you. So why should I make a history timeline?
Well, creating a history timeline offers so many benefits for your child. Timelines provide a visual depiction of historical events, making it easier for students to grasp the sequence of events. It helps them understand their chronology and visualize the connections between different periods or civilizations. And this is especially great for those hands-on learners. My kids love this part of history.
Oh, yeah, mine too. Another benefit is that timelines help with organizational skills. Constructing timelines requires students to organize information in a coherent and structured manner. And they learn to identify significant events, they determine their relative importance, and then they arrange them in that chronological order. It really helps them to hone those analytical skills. And your type A kids really have to be careful. Don't take up too much space on your timeline if you have a lot of things to add on.
That's
right?
true. Oh, yeah, that's absolutely
You might
true.
need to do that in advance, measure your time periods and
Yeah,
let them.
and we didn't really get into that when we were making our notes for this episode, but people do divide it differently. But we're going to
yeah.
talk about
There's
the thematic ways and
Yeah, a million
and
different
little
ways,
Yeah.
really.
Also, when making a timeline, it's important to think carefully about which historical events to include. And students need to think critically about each event, understand how it affects things and how that happened later, and then decide if it's important enough to be on that timeline. So those critical thinking skills really are honed in.
Oh, yeah. Also, research skills. Creating timelines involves conducting research to gather information about historical events, dates, and figures. Students are learning how to locate and evaluate primary and secondary sources. They enhance their research skills by fostering a deep understanding of historical context. We always thought it was really interesting that, so-and-so over here was alive at the same time as this person over here, because sometimes you're learning history in chunks and you don't really think about that on the whole grand scale. And I'm sure you've seen that. There's a meme or a, infographic that talks about how we're closer to Cleopatra in timeline form than Cleopatra was to the pyramids. The ancient pyramids.
Yeah, that's true.
Seeing some of that stuff written out is where you really make those connections.
Or one thing was when we were studying the civil rights and we had Martin Luther King Jr. and Barbara Walters were literally born in the same year.
Yeah, and you think about Martin Luther King as a historic figure.
And she's a living, breathing person.
Right. So it's wild to see some of those connections.
Right, for sure. Also, creating timelines allows your child to express their grasp of history in a creative way. They can jazz up their timelines with drawings or quotes or their own thoughts and can really boost their self expression. It's a cool way to blend art and history all together.
Yeah. It also helps with retention and recall. The visual and interactive nature of timelines enhances your recall of historical information. By actively engaging with the material and then visually representing it, students really reinforce their learning and develop stronger memory retention of the key concepts and events. This really helps when playing trivia or my favorite game, Timeline.
Timeline is such a fun game.
Timeline is such a fun game. We're going to link it. We've talked about it before in another board game episode, but Timeline is this really cool card game where there's several versions of it. Like I have an American history one, I have an inventors one. That was the one that we used to play. The moms would always play that at the store. There's one about like music and TV, but you basically like you have like a group of cards and you make a timeline on the table with the other players, and when it's your turn, like you put your historical event like where you think it happens.
Yeah.
And it's super fun.
It's harder than it looks too.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a really, really fun game. So
also, when students work on history timelines, they're actually engaging with a whole range of subjects beyond just history. They're doing language arts as they write about historical events. They're exploring art through the design and presentation of their timelines, and they are incorporating like technology to research and create visually appealing displays. And they're even connecting with social studies to understand the broader context of events that they're studying. And this multidisciplinary approach not only enriches their understanding of history, but it also helps them to develop skills that they can apply across different subjects and even in real world situations.
right. And, we recently did that episode on UNIS studies, and timelines are a great project to do in conjunction with other projects. Like you can do all these other subjects all mixed into one project.
Absolutely. And you can do this as a group project too. When your kids collaborate on a timeline project, they develop essential teamwork and communication skills by working together. Together, they research, they plan, and they create the timeline. And this cooperative effort fosters their ability to effectively work in groups.
Which is helpful.
Additionally, you can even do this with a group of friends, other homeschoolers, or at a homeschool co-op.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did kind of a twist on this. I used a timeline book, which we'll talk about timeline books later. And I used just one of those books for like all three of my children. We used the same one. And so everybody entered things in at a different time in their homeschool career, and they put their own spin on the entries they made. And I know, especially for Jillian, who was the last one, it was cool to see the book as it progressed and see, like, as she's adding something to something that her brother and sister added, years ago.
I love that.
And to see it all come together. And then I hope it'll be a valuable little memory piece for my family on a bookshelf.
That is such a great keepsake now that they're older. And this is one of the reasons that I did make that Book of Centuries, is because it is such a treasure. I love a wall timeline too, but it's a lot harder to keep, when you want to keep that keepsake. But
when you update your decor, you might want to take that down.
Right. But we're going to get to that shortly. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But when children make a timeline, it helps them to take charge of their learning. They get more interested and involved. And it also makes them feel pride when they see their timelines show about what they've learned about history. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to empower our kids. So this is a great tool to do that.
Yeah, they really can take ownership of their learning. I love that.
After you finish this episode, head on over to our website for show notes, references, and pictures of everything that we're discussing today. You can also join us on Facebook and Instagram for more content and give us a thumbs up. You can also join our Homeschool Freebies Facebook group for helpful resources and tips. Over the years, we found so many free resources all over the place, and we have used them in our homeschool and love them, and we are just out there sharing all this stuff with you. So join us. As we said earlier, there are so many creative ways to make timelines. There really is no right or wrong way to do this.
Oh, absolutely not. And you can even change up as you go. I talked about my timeline book a second ago, but in one of my houses, my original timeline was just like a border that I had along the top of the wall in our little homeschool room. And we just had like timeline figures we would put up there. And then later when we moved, then that's when I started a book, and we took those timeline figures and like just popped them in there. So probably the most common method of creating a timeline is a traditional paper timeline with pen, pencil, paper. This classical approach will allow your children to practice organizational and handwriting skills while they gain that visual understanding of historical events. You can use like one long strip of paper or multiple sheets taped together to create a linear timeline. And you can then encourage your kids to add illustrations, important dates, brief descriptions to make that timeline more engaging for them.
Yeah. And some homeschoolers transform a wall in their homeschooling space into a timeline mural. I had a friend that used their entire garage, all four walls, for their timeline.
Wow.
It was incredibly huge. I used the hallway in my house that leads to the bedrooms and divided it by era.
Yeah, I loved that. Like, yeah, remember we would always wonder, like a kid would go to the bathroom during a project and then they would never come back. And we'd always find them in the hallway, like looking at your timeline.
I have a bunch of pictures. I'm going to put detailed pictures on the website so you can check that out if you want to see it. It was really cool.
It was.
We put everything on that timeline, even our dog's birthday. Everybody thought that was cute. His little picture was on there. You can use butcher paper, or if you don't want to devote an entire wall, you can use something like a large trifold poster board. People do that and then they fold it and put it away because they don't want it out all the time. As you study different periods or civilizations, you can just add visual representations directly onto the timeline wall or the board. You can use markers and stickers or cutouts. We love to use timeline figures. I created a timeline figure bundle. It's got 31 pages and includes 372 cutouts, and everything is on there through recorded human history from the early nomads to modern times. And so this immersive approach of doing a timeline wall turns your learning environment into like kind of a living history exhibit right there in your house.
It's so awesome. And in today's digital age, there's numerous online tools available for creating interactive timelines. Now, I have not done this method, but when we were kind of researching history timelines, I saw this come up and I think it's so cool. Websites like Tiki-Taki, Timeline.js, or Canva offer user-friendly interfaces where students can input historical data and images and videos to create a dynamic timeline. And digital timelines allow for easy editing and sharing. It makes them ideal for like a collaborative project or a presentation. And if you're short on space, like how brilliant to just have it in your computer. That sounds really cool.
I do like that. I really do like to be able to touch it and be hands-on, but I think that this is so cool, especially if you're working with somebody that's not there in your home.
Right. And like modern kids these days who like to do everything on a computer, they might really like that method.
I do like that. For a more personalized and hands-on approach, you may want to consider doing a timeline book. And like Nicole mentioned earlier, she had each one of her children contribute to just one book. If your kids get really creative, they have big art, they may want their own book. Our secular Book of Centuries uses scientific notation rather than religious, and this notation is preferred in scientific and academic writing. And as secular homeschoolers, I was always frustrated with the religious notation, which is what inspired me to create this book. And it even gives a mini lesson on what the different notations are and what they mean. And each 2-page spread of the book is devoted to 100 years or a century of history, Book of Centuries, all the way from 4000 BCE to 2099 CE. You could even use just a blank notebook. You don't have to get that, or just a sketchbook, and your kids can design their own timeline pages. You can use timeline figures, or they can incorporate drawings or quotes, or even personal reflections alongside the historical events or what it meant to them. Some of these historic things that our kids learn are really powerful.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they have some thoughts about that they may want to add. So whether you use a Book of Centuries or a blank journal, they're both a great hands-on activity and gives a tangible record and just a beautiful little keepsake for years to come.
I know. I love that. So you can also enhance a traditional timeline with multimedia elements like an audio recording or a podcast or QR codes. Students can research primary sources, interviews, or speeches related to a specific historical event and then embed them in their timeline.
I think that's brilliant.
I think it is too. Like my kids now would like really enjoy doing that, even though like My older ones obviously don't need to be making a timeline, but I should tell Jillian she could add that to our current one. But this multimedia approach, it not only provides deeper insights into historical context, but it also caters to different learning styles and preferences. We did always have like some books like Usborne Books and Magic Treehouse would have like links to outside sources and things like that. We had a lot of those type of books that had internet links, which was kind of cool.
I think the QR code thing is just brilliant. I mean, you could do that. You don't have to use a digital timeline. You could actually do that in your house, whether it's a wall or a book.
Like stick it on your
and
paper
print
timeline.
out the QR and stick it, and then people go down to the timeline and start scanning things and reading about it. I love
People
it.
would never leave your hallway when they go to the bathroom.
I think it's brilliant. I really love that. I want to do another timeline now just
I know,
for that.
right? An adult timeline.
Yeah, we need that.
That'd be funny.
You could also do thematic timelines. Rather than focusing solely on chronological order, you can explore history through a theme. Like you can choose a particular theme or topic, such as something like women's rights or wars, or you can create a timeline highlighting key events and figures within that theme. And thematic timelines offer a more nuanced understanding of historical connections and development. So it's kind of cool. You can like make a different timeline for each thing that you're studying.
Right. And that's great for like a unit study thing. Like say you're doing just a study on World War II. Like you could have just a World War II timeline.
I love that.
Yeah. And you could do those all separately and then put them all together at the end or not, or just do one as a project. I love that. History timelines really serve as invaluable tools for homeschoolers. It really helps students organize information and identify these patterns and develop a deeper appreciation for the past. By exploring all these different methods of creating timelines, we really like make history come alive in our homeschool curriculum. And I know a lot of people thought history was boring when they were in school. This is a way to like change that up. You can still, like we talked about before, you can still like get really involved in learning this alongside your kid.
You really can. And as we wrap up, whether you use a wall timeline or the Book of Centuries, interactive digital platforms, or thematic projects, the possibilities really are so endless. And by infusing creativity and enthusiasm into your homeschool approach, you can cultivate a love for learning that will inspire and empower your children for years to come. We talk about this all the time on the podcast, that's really what we want for them.
Yeah.
So get ready, grab your markers, and let's go on a journey through time.
So meanwhile, tune in next week for episode 66. We're going to be talking about transitioning to college. 7 tips for when classes start. Some of you might have some kids going off to college in the fall. This is going to be a great episode.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Be sure to check us out on our website at btdthomeschool.com, as in been there, done that, btdthomeschool.com. You can join our mailing list and get news and updates on future podcasts, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at the BTDT Been There, Done That Homeschool Podcast.